What I have here is I've got my Seb Max. I've used this rest for years. It's solid. It works very well. One thing I don't like about the Seb, and one of the reasons that I wanted to change the design and come up with something, first of all, very heavy. And the older I get, the less weight I want to lug around. The other thing that I noticed, so these come with two counterbalance springs. They're under the mounting plate, or they're under the sandbag. You got to strip that off to get to these. They don't have a lot of adjustment. They don't have enough adjustment to truly achieve counterbalance because of so much friction is built into this design. Nothing wrong with the design, but there's a lot of stiction in there just from the way that it's made with the grease and the gibs and all that. You got 4 sliding keys and 4 slots and the grease meniscus and all that. So Mike Radigan came up with a really ingenious idea, and it works great for bench rest. Not so much for F-class where you got to lug stuff around to and from the line. And anybody that's ever shot with a Radigan mod understands that this is like the difference between shooting a gun that's not in tune and then picking one up that's in center of tune. You're in the center of the window and it just wants to hammer X's all day long. This makes a difference, a great improvement. Unfortunately, it's heavy, it's clunky, and usually you got to make allowances for certain things like your front post. It's always trying to hit. Anyway, so good idea, improvement, but never see them on the F-class line. I don't know that I've ever seen that on the F-class line. They probably use them in bench rest. So that's the Seb. Great rest, but it has some annoyances, and one of them being it's hard to get them in true counterbalance. You're overcoming a lot of friction with these springs, and the springs give you the false sense that you're in counterbalance when you're actually not, because it's got so much friction that counterbalance is masked. I'm going to show you the difference between this technology and what I've come up with. We talked about the Radigan mod that addresses counterbalance and actually made a very stable shooting platform. Guns don't just slide back and forth. They torque under recoil. They put down forces on it depending on how the barrel and action are bedded into the stock relative to the axis of motion, the straightness of the stock. There's probably 100 different things that can affect the amount of energy that's transferred into the rest. So if you're out of counterbalance, all you're doing is you're holding position for the shot with friction. All right, so let's say we come up to our center of our target one time and we go down the next. All right, so what happens when your shot breaks? You have overcome the friction of the Teflon gibs or whatever design you're shooting. And that shot breaks and puts a little bit of inertia into this in the vertical position. You can lose that hold slightly, and we see that in shots dropping out the bottom occasionally. Like we come up, we come up, we come up, and we go too far and we come down and take our shot. What happens? We've preloaded the stiction out of that rest, and the potential for that shot dropping out the bottom becomes greater because of the counterbalance. The proper counterbalance has not been achieved. I'm going to show you how that works. All right, so my rest, I'm going to take out all the friction. There's 2 knobs back here that I back off. These are up against Teflon wear pads that take a slight amount of movement out of the top, but also creates a little bit of drag. We're going to get back, when we're all done, we're going to dial that back in. More importantly, underneath here, there's a bearing trace on this forward bearing of the joystick. All right, so, and that's where you get your primary amount of friction in the feel of your joystick. So I'm going to back that off and just snug it enough to hold the bearing in location. And again, mine has a 2-ratio bearing system, so I can get double the MOA. That's another video that you'll see on my channel. All right, so I've taken all the friction out of it. It's free to just flop around. All right, I've got an adjustable joystick. If I'm shooting my Sierra stock, it's a little shorter. I'm going to have my stick somewhere right up about here. If I'm shooting my Macmillan ZRs, it's going to be back about here, because that's a very long gun, and I'm going to get all I can out of that stick, so I'm not reaching forward. The length of your joystick will affect counterbalance. Now, it won't on some of the others, because there's so much friction in it that counterbalance is masked or disguised with friction. And getting true counterbalance is the goal here. So let me put a gun on it. My gun weighs 15 pounds on the forearm when it's in the wrist, so there's 15 pounds. You'll notice that with all the tension out of this thing, there's some movement. I wouldn't dare shoot that without holding it, right? All right, but you'll notice that when I go up, it drops a little bit. When I go down, it raises a little bit. This tells you that the spring system, and we've only got two systems. We're either going to use springs or we're going to use a big old counterweight, cantilevered off the front. I don't want to do that. It's not a good solution for me. My way of thinking, there's a better way. All right, so this is done with springs. So there I'm unloading the springs and I'm underbalanced. Here I'm preloading the springs, I'm overbalanced. Okay, so how do we get perfect balance? Well, we're right there. What we do now is we put the friction in, dial just a little friction in here, and then I'll go in here on the bottom, on that set screw that we talked about, and I'll dial just a little bit of tension, not much. Now you notice, that's what friction is for. That's to hold that little bit of imbalance from a spring that's overloaded or underloaded. So in this condition, this is the way I shoot it. I can let go of it without ill effects, but I tend to hold it. I'm a stick holder. I want to plant my hand on the ground. I want to hold the stick right there, and I will dial with my bridge. With this design, it allows me to perfectly place my crosshair where I want it with my hand on the ground. The rest is in perfect balance. When the shot breaks, it's not going to try to pop up. It's not going to try to pop down. It's right there. It's going to stay there. Let me show you the adjusters. How do we achieve balance? Very simple. I've got a series of springs. I've got actually 4 of them, where the other rest out there use 2. I've got 4. I've got 2 fully compressed right here. And that gets me very, very close on an F-class rig. Now, it may be just a little bit much, a little bit too little. These here are where the fine adjustment comes in. All right, so what I do with that, again, let me take the friction back out, and I'll go through this one more time. Let me take all the friction out of this rest that I can. All right. Let me run this bridge back up so I've got a little bit more room. And again, all of this is done it can be done with your rifle in the rest. And my Allen wrench, I set an Allen wrench with the rest for this. All right, so I've taken all the friction out of it. I set my gun on it, and I started adjusting, and with my joystick, the length I want, I started adjusting these. I want to unload these. You'll notice it comes up a little bit, but it falls down a lot. I want that fall and that rise to be about equal. All right, so I need more. All right, so I'm going to dial these in just a little bit, and these run really free. All right, there it raises to just about the middle. There it drops to just about the middle. That's as simple as it gets. All right, so I'm right there. I'm counterbalanced. I'm nearly perfect. I can mess with it a little bit more, perhaps, and get it to be exactly the same amount of drop as rise. That's good. All right, so now dial back my friction on my Teflon. You'll see immediately it's acting like it's just coming off of this top by a little, going up off the bottom just a little. Okay, so that's good. I've got a little bit of, and I've taken all the small amount of play in this back and forth lateral motion. I've taken that out with these 2 adjusters. Now I'm going to dial in my friction with this bearing race. And as I put a little pressure on that, it goes elliptical, and it provides pressure or friction on the joystick. So now I'm in a perfectly balanced condition. The stick will stay exactly where I put it throughout the shot, but yet it has low enough friction that I can precisely place my crosshair where I want it. I don't have to overpower it to get there. I don't have to go past it and come back. I can hold any part of the X in the X ring. I shot a shoot last Saturday, and I was just amazed. It was one of those days that I could run full 55 power and everything was really bright and sharp, and I was actually able to hold my crosshair on my Night Force competition in the crux of the X. So I was maybe a quarter MOA off of dead center hold. My gun was favoring just a bit high, so I was able to hold resolution that I have never achieved on any other rest. So that's the benefits of a true counterbalance system, and I do that within a very light package. My rest weighs a little less than a Neo, so kind of a different approach, but that's how it works. Thanks for watching.